Assalamualaikum. Today we are going to learn about types of coordinated response. At the end of the lesson, you should be able to give examples of voluntary action, examples of involuntary action, outline the transmission of impulse in voluntary action, and outline the transmission of impulse in involuntary action. There are two types of coordinated response. Number one, voluntary action, and number two, involuntary action. The integrating center for voluntary action is the cerebrum. For involuntary action, medulla oblongata. Voluntary action is conscious action under control of will, whereas involuntary action occurs automatically without any conscious actions not controlled by will. Voluntary involve external stimuli, involuntary involve internal stimuli. The receptor involved in voluntary action are the sensory receptor, while in involuntary action, the receptor are specialized internal receptor. In voluntary action, impulse is transmitted from the brain to the skeletal muscle, whereas for involuntary action, impulse is transmitted from the medulla oblongata to the smooth muscles, or to the cardiac muscles, or to the glands. Examples of voluntary action: walking, thinking, kicking, singing. Examples of involuntary response: breathing, peristalsis, heartbeat, vasodilation, vasoconstriction. Let's take a look at an experiment to initiate knee-jerk reflex. Observe the diagram. What happens to the leg immediately after tapping? Does the same action occur again if the knee is tapped the second time? What are reflex actions? Reflex action is a quick, inborn, automatic response towards a certain stimuli, and it does not involve the cerebrum, meaning you don't have to think about producing the response. The function of the reflex action is for protection. You don't need to learn how to produce reflex action. The same stimulus will initiate the same type of response at different times. Some examples of reflex action are: number one, the knee jerk; number two, when you accidentally touches a hot object, you will withdraw your hand automatically. Number three, blinking; you cannot control blinking. Number three, coughing, sneezing, and the size of your pupil when you move from a bright area to a dark area, or vice versa. The pathway the impulse travels from the receptor to the effector is called reflex arc. It is sort of like a route the impulse needs to take to get from the receptor to the effector to produce impulse. Let's take a look at knee-jerk reflex arc. It involves two types of neurons. Number one, the afferent neuron or sensory neuron, and number two, the efferent neuron or the motor neuron. Observe the diagram. Now let's take a look at the steps in knee-jerk reflex action. First, the hammer hits a tendon that connects the quadricep muscle in the thigh to a bone in the lower leg. Can anybody recall the name of the bone in the lower leg? The sharp tap on the tendon produces a force that stretches the quadricep muscles. These stimulate the stress receptors in the muscles to trigger nerve impulses or to generate nerve impulses. The nerve impulses then travel along the afferent neuron across the synapse to the efferent neuron in the spinal cord. The efferent neuron then transmit this information to the quadricep muscles, The quadricep muscles contract, causing the leg to swing forward, producing kicking motion. Let's take a look at touching a hot object reflex arc. It involves three types of neurons: the afferent neuron or the sensory neuron, the interneuron, and the efferent neuron, or also known as the motor neuron. Observe the diagram. Other reflex actions such as coughing, sneezing, blinking, they are called cranial reflex actions. The control center is in the medulla oblongata. Voluntary action produce conscious response to a certain stimulus. It involves the cerebrum of the brain. We humans and mammals are aware of all the steps involved in the response. Our response may differ from time to time depending on our experience. We store all our experience in the cerebrum so that we can choose the best way to respond to a certain stimulus. Pathway of voluntary action. First, receptor receives the stimulus. The receptor will be stimulated and it will produce or trigger nerve impulse. The nerve impulse will be carried by the afferent neuron to the central nervous system. The impulse crosses the synapse to the interneuron, which carry the impulse to the cerebrum. The cerebrum and the central nervous system interpret the impulse, and they produce another set of impulse which crosses the synapse to the efferent neuron. The efferent neuron carries the impulse to the effector. And lastly, the effector will produce the appropriate response. Let's take a look at some diseases related to the nervous system. The first one is Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's disease involves the cells in the movement control center. The cells begin to die, resulting in the loss of control over speech, head movement, and body movement. So the person will be shaking all the time. Usually it happens to old person, but it can also happen to younger person. The next one is Alzheimer. Alzheimer is a disease of the nerve where a healthy person suddenly lost its ability to think, to do reasoning, and memory loss. This happens because the brain cells begin to shrink and start dying. So the person can't remember anything, they will become like children. Even simple things they can't remember. The next one is amnesia. This one affects the memory caused by the damage of the frontal lobe. The victim or the person suffering from amnesia have memory loss related to past experiences in their life. And the next one is aphasia. It is brain damage affecting the communication ability of a person. Suddenly, the person lost its ability to speak, to construct sentence, either on paper or verbally, cannot recognize speech itself. This happens when there is a damage in the front part of the brain. There are other diseases related to the nervous system, but we're going to take a look at these four only. That's all for today. Thank you for listening.